contracts. Most energy is through contracts, and not that much through spot markets. But spot markets are what tell you what's going on now, and make a huge difference to those people who don't have contracts and who suddenly need the oil and gas. Yeah.
The price of the pump, that's based on spot market fluctuations?
No, it's often on contracts of the distributors who provide it to the gas stations. And that's usually people who are, the distributors are usually taking it from the refineries, and the refineries are pricing according to world fluctuations and world spot prices. Now, they may have contracts, but they may also use the spot market simply to justify their prices, or to guard against the fact that when the contract runs out, if they've got fairly short-term contracts, they're going to be screwed. So they may be kind of anticipating price changes farther down the supply chain by pricing higher for you at the gas station. But no, but this stuff, has a lot. That's trying to get at what causes the actual price at the gas pump is an interesting problem. But getting back to sort of big prices and world prices, oil prices have actually been surprisingly stable through much of modern history. This is from World War II to the end of the 90s. This one goes actually into the early 2000s. And what you see is that the price was very stable in the golden age, the post-war age, and actually falling. Then it went through this incredible period of leaps here, these two leaps in the 70s. Then it settled down again and actually started falling. And here you wouldn't have guessed, of course. Markets are not good predictors. So here you would never guess that would have happened. So you have these two big crisis peaks in modern times, the 70s and the 2000s. The 70s actually has a double peak, sort of 73 and 79. Now, OPEC was set up during the 60s to counter this. That is the declining price by the oil. It's the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, and mostly third world countries, but not entirely. And what happened is that these countries got independent after the period of independence from colonialism. They realized many of them were sitting on oil, and they got together and said, let's form some kind of an alliance, some kind of a monopoly to control prices to keep them from falling so much, because we're getting screwed. So they were actually able to intervene in a way that coffee makers and producers are often not able to do, to control prices. And they did start to intervene, sort of stabilize prices. But then there was the Arab-Israeli War in 1973. There was an Arab oil boycott in the Middle East that suddenly shrank supplies, and that's where you got that 73 price blip. And at that time, everybody said, oh, you see, oil prices are all due to OPEC. OPEC is terrible. You're those nasty Arabs, and so on and so on and so on. It caused our recession. Well, you already know it didn't cause that recession and that turning point in the early 70s. It contributed maybe 1% to about a 10% shift in profit rates. But anyway, OPEC then became the boogeyman. And in fact, OPEC doesn't control all oil. It does control a huge amount because it has Saudi Arabia especially. And it generally manages prices in both directions. It doesn't like prices to go up and up and up because then people will shift out of oil. So it's in their interest to keep prices more or less stable, but to profit off of periods in which prices are rising. So of course they like good prices, but not excessive prices because then they'll lose their market. So, and they're not fools, especially the Saudi oil ministry, which is the key price controller in this game. So what happened in the 2000s? And the 79, I guess I didn't say, 1979 was the Iranian Revolution. And suddenly Iran was out of the picture. There was a lot of tension around the Persian Gulf, sudden shortages and panic, and prices shot up to the sky in 79. And then it went back to normal after that. Okay. In the 2000s, we got an oil bubble, which was caused by a combination of Chinese and third world demand, plus some first world. I mean, the world economy, remember, was growing in the 2000s before it exploded in the crisis of 2008. On top of that, you had the Iraq War, which broke out with the invasion in 2003 and went on and on and on, which did affect not only actually Iraq's contribution, which is big but not that big, but also kind of made everybody nervous. So that could have driven up prices to a certain degree. But the big reason for this huge peak here turns out to be financial speculation. That the hedge fund boys, the financial boys, who had a lot of extra money to burn in this credit bubble, were playing in the commodity markets. And all commodity prices were being jacked up. Minerals, food, and oil and gas. So oil wasn't the only thing, but it went up. I think it peaked at $185 per barrel, which is quite astounding. But it's still down around 100 right now, 110, depending on which market price you're talking about. And indeed, the U.S. Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigation reported that the role of market speculation was substantial, blah, blah, blah. So it's not just me inventing this. And what happened, this huge peak here is, it's already going up kind of rapidly, but this peak is when the hedge funds get clobbered by the 2008 financial bubble burst, and they shift into commodities and get out of stocks and mortgages. And suddenly there's this huge run-up in 2009. And of course, all this triggered massive talk, which you don't hear so much about today, of the exhaustion of energy supplies. And Hubbard's peak, that you hit peak oil, you have to hit peak oil. Well, there's obviously a logic to that if you keep extracting this stuff endlessly, you do tend to exhaust your supplies. But as I told you last time, this kind of exhaustion of supplies has historically mostly been very geographical. That is, you exhaust in one place, then you move on to another place. Now, it's true we may be at the limits of the Earth, but as I'll argue next time, it's not in oil. The limits of the Earth have much more to do with climate change than it has to do with running out of oil. Because even at $100 a barrel, you could all take a bath in it. It would be cheaper than going to Calistoga for a mud bath. Because a barrel is quite a lot of oil. Maybe get 2 baths out of it. $50 a bath. Right? Some of you pay more than that for your pedicures. Okay, so oil, the idea that oil is simply running out is bogus. It is just not true. And with these new, and especially with acid tar sands and fracking of gas, suddenly gas has gone from, well, less than petroleum to being equal to Saudi Arabia just in the U.S. So I assure you that we have not run out of oil, that Hubbard's peak is happening. But where has it happened? It happened in the U.S. We were running out of oil. We were vastly over-consuming oil and gas, and suddenly we panicked because we were importing. Our prices were looking bad. Americans are panicking about their inability to meet their voracious consumption needs, and so on. That's really what's going on. And whether it's true at the world level, you can argue about, but the evidence so far just doesn't justify it. And there is some evidence. It's getting harder to find. It's getting more expensive. So you could see prices crawling upward. But seeing a kind of Hubbard's peak where it suddenly falls off very dramatically, ain't going to happen. I wish it would because it might save the Earth. Politics and great powers. Okay. As usual, economics is too important to be left to the market. Contrary to everything you've been taught all your lives, the state always is there. The state always is intervening. The state always is bolstering the market. And one of the places you see this most clearly is that every state in the world that's powerful, is trying to assure itself its energy supplies. It is doing whatever it can. And it shows up in different ways in different places, whether it's going externally or it's internally. Oh, I should have said about the frontiers that the interesting thing about fracking and the tar sands is that's actually an example of going from the extensive frontier back to the more intensive nearby frontier with new technologies. Okay, so states are still very active. The book I required for this course, Michael Clare's book, is very much about this idea of external frontiers, everybody fighting for resources under a kind of imperial battle model like pre-World War I. I think he exaggerates, but I think it's a great read, and he has a lot of great numbers, a lot of great facts. And, you know, if it weren't true that this stuff really mattered, why do we keep going to war so often about it? Just in the Persian Gulf, for God's sake. When the Iranian Revolution happens, the U.S., there's Donald Rumsfeld, the great enemy of Saddam Hussein, shaking his hand because we had just reached a deal with him to supply him with equipment. The Germans supplied him with equipment that he could use against the naughty Iranians. And he unleashed a bloodbath in the Persian Gulf. How many people died? It's at least 1 million. It was an unbelievably bloody mess, which was conveniently forgotten, except when you needed to say Saddam was a bad guy, because he was. But who's this guy shaking his hand? Huh, funny thing. But then Saddam makes this mistake and invades Kuwait, and that was a no-no. So George Bush Sr. goes in and smacks him down, and at least wisely then did not invade Iraq. His son was not so wise, and in 2003, he and Rumsfeld, who changed their view of Saddam, went in and invaded Iraq. This is rubbished Iraqi tanks from the 91 war. Now, the Iraq war was not just about oil, but if you think it wasn't partly about oil, you're wrong. It was definitely partly about oil. The Persian Gulf is too important to be left to Saddam Hussein and not to the imperial overlord. Russia and Europe have this really interesting relationship. Russia ships all this gas, which it is now trying to make more money out of because it doesn't do much else, because its industrial economy collapsed in the 90s with the unleashing of the wonderful market, which may have been a good idea in the long run, but in the short run was a disaster for Russian output. So Putin, when he took charge, started seizing control of the gas and oil, putting it under Gazprom, and getting those revenues going into the national state to make the state stronger so that it could hold the system together and be powerful and be a world player and so on. Russia sells to not only to Europe, but also sells to the Ukraine, constant friction there, tremendous friction along these pipelines. They now want to run a pipeline through the Baltic Sea to avoid all these nasty countries they have to go through, so they don't have to pay Poland and all. That's a Russian-German deal. There's big debates over the southern end of this system, going through the Baltic, the Caspian. Azerbaijan and Armenia fought a war over oil and gas pipelines here. It's ugly. The U.S., part of the reason the U.S. was in Iraq, as you'll learn in the Clare book, is to get more bases in the Middle East so we could be players in controlling oil and gas fields and pipelines through the Middle East. So it wasn't just Iraqi oil, it was the Middle East in general and the movement of oil and gas, not just the production of it. Well, I used to have more slides on this, but it's, you know how the American attention is. We can't remember anything 10 years old. So that's old history now, ancient history, so we'll move on. Now the U.S., of course, very busy in Africa, formed a new military command in Africa. What's that about? It's about oil and resources. Chevron is very big in Angola. ExxonMobil is very big in West Africa. The Europeans are right in there, too. Don't think they're nice just because they have lower per capita consumption. They're all over the place, and boy, are they quick to get back into Libya. Oh, yeah. They want their oil really, really bad. And now China, of course, has entered the game, the great game, in a big way. It's got deals in Central Asia to get those pipelines going east instead of west. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it's not just a trade deal, it's a resource deal. And the key resource is generally energy. So in all these Central Asian republics coming under the kind of hegemony, there's kind of a struggle with Russia and China over hegemony in Central Asia. China's been making some very serious inroads. Also investments as well. China is also, as I talked about before, very busy in Africa. Some of that's about oil, although it's about a lot of other things like food and minerals. And then very big disputes in the East China Sea, South China Sea, whatever, which is it east or south? Battles with Japan and Taiwan over these islands and offshore control of the offshore oil out here. East China Sea, there it is. Oh, gas fields, excuse me, it's gas. And they're also fighting with Vietnam over islands down in Southeast Asia and the Philippines. And China is very big, really flexing its muscles out here to get control of these oil and gas fields. So very big in the politics of East Asia. We don't hear that much about it. And then just final point here about oil wealth is that, is there a resource curse? Again, well, if you have oil, somebody gets rich. And there's always somebody who gets really rich because this stuff's really valuable and it's free. It has a little pumping cost, but compared to what it's worth on the market, it's nothing. So there's a lot of fortunes made in oil, whether it's, we tend to think of Arab sheikhs, but how about John Paul Getty, the greatest distorter of the world art market ever, and so on and so on. Oil companies, people get rich on this. I can't remember, that's Rockefeller Center, sorry. Companies get rich, individuals get rich, countries, but these rich oil countries, it's usually individuals that are getting really filthy rich. But the problem with that is a lot of it, the riches go to what we can call profiteering, parasitism, that is generals in Nigeria or sheikhs in Bahrain, or wherever, who get the money, it's personal, family money, small elites, and they take it and they either invest it in unbelievably ridiculous houses and high-rises, or they invest it in, they love the sheikhs for a couple of 3 decades now, they just love English estates. So, thriftless and penniless English families that have these baronial estates sell them off to rich Middle Easterners, who then buy their way a piece of England. Or they just stick it in a bank account. Switzerland has been very accommodating. And again, it's back to that world of offshore tax haven. Oh, by the way, did you see the headlines? Poltergeist. Did you see the headlines about how the electronics companies are once again going through lobbying Congress to give them a tax holiday to repatriate their profits? And this is actually the 3rd time that this has happened. It was done under Reagan. It was done in 2004. And it obviously really, really helped the United States to have them bring their trillions back at a lower tax rate. They want 5% roughly. And of course, Apple and these companies have been some of the biggest, and Google, some of the biggest weasels on earth. Even though they make wonderful products, we learned to hate oil companies, but we learned to love Steve Jobs. But Apple is a weasel company too. Just as big a weasel as the oil companies. And what's really sad is how you buy and sell congresspeople, right? Barbara Boxer is carrying this legislation because it's pro-electronics, pro-high-tech. Must be good. Kind of sad. Kind of sad. Okay, and then of course the other kind of profiteering is these guys, you'll get countries that are just ripped apart. Iraq is one. They're still fighting each other over who gets the oil revenues. In Africa, this has happened several times. Sometimes it's over diamonds, sometimes it's over copper, sometimes it's over wood, as I said last time, and sometimes it's over oil, and it tears countries apart, makes it impossible to govern them, to set up any kind of stable state, stable economy. And Africa is kind of sort of in the 2000s, fortunately came out of a really bad period of civil wars and has been growing because of resource demand. But, you think of the Congo, some of that's oil, although most of it's not, and what a brutal situation that is. I don't think this is over. But oil can be used for development, just as resources can always be used for development and for national autonomy, national development, national power and prestige. And a lot of the Middle Eastern countries and OPEC countries have been very smart about this. They've pushed aside the oil companies. They've formed their own companies. Mexico was the first one to do this. When did they do it? In the revolution. Under Cardenas in the 1930s, the kind of second Mexican revolution of the 1930s when they nationalized all the American oil. And it was a great thing for Mexico. And so they still have Pemex, you got Petrobras. And the Saudis have actually been very sagacious about this, developing more refining capacity, reinvesting at home in infrastructure, technology, and so on. Bahrain has turned itself, and Doha and basically the United Arab Republic turned themselves into the financial center of the Middle East, so that they're doing more and are now investing all over the world. So they're using their somewhat ill-gotten gains, often in strategic capitalist ways. I won't say wonderful socialist ways, but strategic capitalist ways. Chavez was very keen on doing this and on being a socialist and a great friend of the poor and so on. And he did do a lot for poor people in Venezuela. But what he forgot to do was reinvest in the oil sector, and he's frittered away a lot of the money. Prices haven't been as good lately, and Venezuela is a one-horse economy. It's never diversified. That wasn't just Chavez. That was everybody for the last half century in Venezuela has never diversified. Extremely unequal country, extremely unpromising country in terms of development. And Chavez really never changed that, even though he used his oil wealth in some good ways. So it's not an easy thing to break out of this. And of course, energy and power have always gone together. So the energy boys have a way of controlling the states and the imperial powers in a way that you always want to look at. You always want to look behind the curtain. This is well documented. The Rockefellers became the most important family in New York. David Rockefeller was the king of Wall Street throughout the post-war period. He was the guy. He was the man, and his brother Nelson became governor of New York. And then they had another brother who was senator from West Virginia, governor of West Virginia, and so on and so on. So the Rockefellers were hugely powerful on the basis of their oil wealth, which they by and large was kind of an enlightened, sort of progressive capitalist, I would have to say. They make some of our more recent capitalists, or the more recent capitalists and financiers in this country make the Rockefellers look like positively, soft and smiling icons of goodwill. Under Bush, basically, Texas has always been run by its oil men, and now they've briefly ran the United States, which they've also kind of run, at least in certain dimensions. California oil people have run American oil regulation policy, or did for decades, so don't think that didn't happen. Obama had his moment with oil, and what did he do? Capitulate, as always. The BP blowout, the worst oil disaster in history, and what are we doing now? Setting up oil leases all over again. And everybody forgets, except the fish. But they're dead, so it doesn't matter. And coal, if you don't think coal has power, go look at American energy policy, which is completely unreconstructed. Go, man, go, to hell with the earth. And King Coal owns quite a few senators and congressmen. And, promoting coal as clean fuel and unbelievable rubbish. So I like my little phrase I came up with this morning, Earth is just Appalachia. This has always been true in Appalachia, right? Duke power. And now it's us. But it was nice under Bush because you could really see, the smiling face of Dick Cheney was really the face of Texas oil power. You really could see it. It was nasty. It was direct. And as welcome back to California, it was not well hidden. You see that you saw the cartoon? It says, they want to lower a dome over the dome to stop the leak. Remember they put a dome over the blowout at Deepwater Horizon? So that's pretty cute, I thought. Okay, now I just want to talk a little bit about electricity, which is a whole other kind of subject into itself. What do I got? Growth generation grids. Oh, I think I added a couple of things. Oopsie. Oh, shoot. Well, anyway. Growing use of electricity. We've shifted more and more into electrical appliances because they're smarter. They're more flexible. You can do more things with electric power. It's very bad for running vehicles. Unless you can generate it within the vehicle, it's really still not. Electric cars are not actually that great an idea, but they are better than just spewing fumes everywhere. But electricity is really good for things like computers, for subtle things, electronics. It's really bad for heating and railroad cars. Yeah.
Electric cars actually are quite developed. It's just they're not used everywhere because the current electrical grid really can't handle it.
Yeah, well, the problem with electric cars, again, the only virtue they have is if they work off the grid when it's on non-peak power. When it's humming along anyway, generating all this power that isn't being used, then you plug in your cars. And that's where the efficiency in electric cars comes from. Otherwise, there's no gain. You're running a motor off electricity generated